Hey everybody, this is Jackie Luqman. And on the phone is the other half of Luqman Nation, the producer, Mr. Abdushahid Luqman. Hey, hon.
Hey, baby, how you doing?
So, welcome to another edition of Live and Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation. Pick it up, Mr. Luqman.
The most controversial, the most threatening, the most dangerous show on social media anywhere.
Anywhere. So, as you can hear, Mr. Luqman is out and about procuring some provisions for Luqman Nation. Yes, he is masked and gloved up, just sitting in traffic behind an accident. Could not get here back to the studio in time, but the show must always go on because we got to keep talking about these issues, folks, about how this coronavirus is impacting Black, Latino, Native folks, and how, despite what the feel good social media posts and Twitter videos and memes and news media and feel good stories that they want to put out there about how, ooh, we're all in this together, how all these governors who are now opening up their states are talking about, ooh, we're all in this together. No, we ain't. We ain't all in this together. Because today, today we're going to talk about coronavirus in black and white, because if it's not clear to you that this virus is exposing not only the serious contradictions and failures of capitalism in this country and around the world, it's also exposing the racial divide, the racial and class injustices that have existed in this country for centuries that you just would not listen to us to address. So, before we get into it, hey, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for your continued support. Share this video if you're watching. Start a watch party. Invite your friends. If you're over there on YouTube, invite your friends. Let them know. Subscribe to us on YouTube. Follow us on Facebook. We kind of hate Twitter, but we know we have to use it more. But, follow us on Twitter, Luqman Nation #1, all one word. If you like what you see and hear in Luqman Nation, please consider becoming a patron. You can find us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/Luqman Nation, LuqMannation. $3, $5, $7 a month, or whatever you are able to or comfortable with supporting us with a month. Yes, there are special. Yes, we will take it. We appreciate it, and we will put it to good use, and you will see you will see your support being put to good use. And yes, there are special treats for patrons, behind the scenes videos, some extra audio, some additional live streams that only patrons receive on our Patreon account. So consider becoming a patron. Babe.
Yeah.
So, the states are reopening. The states are reopening, hon, and it looks like they're really just trying to push poor people back to going to work. That's all this looks like to me. What about you?
Well, I mean, how else can you look at it any other way? I mean, all of the jobs that they are rushing to open up are service industry jobs. They're not rushing up to open up factories. They're not rushing to open up contract work as far as white collar jobs and all those other things. But it's the service industry, and we know that we're overrepresented. Black and Latino people are overrepresented in these type of industries. So and today you and I was looking at a news story where they were talking about a restaurant that was opened up in Georgia, and who did we see? A Latina, well, appeared to be a Latina, who was back there waitressing with no protection at all.
Right. And one of the preconditions for businesses reopening in Georgia was that the employees, I think, are supposed to be required to have masks and gloves on. I mean,
Exactly.
So look, this whole thing about these states reopening and these protests, these anti stay at home order protests. You know, we were just talking, hun, a little bit ago about how these folks who are protesting these anti stay at home orders, they are acting like they are being forced to stay at home by gunpoint. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah.
that they are acting as if they are literally on house arrest. And some white Republican politician, I think it was Attorney General, Klansman in the Klansman Attorney General, William Barr, I think he actually said that the stay-at-home orders go too far, and that they're likening to house arrest. Stay-at-home orders are not like house arrest, y'all.
Not at all.
Do you have an ankle monitor? Anybody put an ankle monitor on you? Is there an armed guard posted at your door forcing you to stay in your house, threatening you with violence if you leave? No, that's just us. That's just black folks. That's what the cops do to black people when we don't obey the curfews and the stay-at-home orders where a whole bunch of us live. But
And they're fine with that. And I mean, and those people like that, they're fine with that when it's done to us. I mean, let's look at the recent incidences. I say within the last year or two of just having the cops called on us just for us just living our lives. You know, barbecuing while black and what you know, even being called, having the cops called on you when you're riding with your white grandma.
right.
And you're accused of carjacking her and stuff. So I mean, so when it comes to these fascist, behavioral tactics, they have a problem when it's done to us.
Mm-hmm. And see, none of the people who have been protesting at these anti stay at home order protests have been approached by the police. And none of them have been told to go home. None of them have been stopped. None of them have been ticketed, fined, detained. Ain't no cops said nothing to them. As a matter of fact, they got, in a lot of cities, they got police escorts.
Exactly.
So these people talking about they're oppressed and their freedom is being denied. Nobody told you you couldn't go out at all. The stay at
Right.
home order is just to keep to the idea is just to not go out if you don't have to limit your trips out if you don't have to go out so that you limit your exposure to other people. That's it. And if you do go out, if you are able to wear some kind of face covering to protect yourself and other people, and wear gloves if you can, and stay the hell 6 feet away from other folks. That's it. That's not. But look, any kind of infringement upon white people's ability to do whatever the hell they want in this country feels like oppression to a bunch of people who have never been told that they can't do what they want.
Yeah, and it's just like the white privilege that we talk about. That so many people and white people in particular are really unaware of what means. One of the and the fact that it doesn't register with them about even their own privilege. The fact that you had the privilege of even staying home. So many
Right.
people, yeah, so many workers are considered essential, especially in the service industries and stuff, who can't stay home. So the fact that they're protesting to get out means that they have the privilege to even stay home doing this. And nobody complained about, oh well, I couldn't, I need to get out so I can work. I need to go out so I can earn money so I can pay my rent and my mortgage. No, it was about getting a haircut. It was
Right.
about getting my nails done. It was about, being waited upon.
Mm-hmm.
Jackie, I was just thinking and imagine, what if there was a bunch of black people just switch it around. It was a bunch of black people that were saying that. It was like, well, you see how lazy they are. They're not even talking about going to do the job. Well, no, they
Right.
talked about working. They didn't talk about how to earn money. They didn't talk about hurting financially. Where most of the unemployment rate is becoming so, the numbers are going up so much that some economists say that, this is almost akin to
Yeah.
So yeah, so it's like, but nobody is saying that. Wow, we need to get out so we can earn money. No, it's all about having people wait upon them. So they don't even look at the privilege of even being able to just do that. You
Right.
know.
Right.
So
But the point you just made about, what would happen if black people did that, if we protested, look, I want to go get a haircut. I want to go, these stay-at-home orders are violating our freedom. We need a haircut. I want to go get a burger. I mean, we have protested the lack of inclusion for us in the job market. We've literally protested the lack of decent paying jobs at many times throughout the history of this country. And what have we been met with when we have protested for actual real jobs? Oh, y'all need to go home. Y'all not doing it the right way. You need to stop complaining. This is the greatest country in the world. You should be satisfied with what you get.
yeah,
You
you
know,
should go to school.
you should go back to school. If you don't get paid enough on the job you have, you need to go back to school and so you can get another job. See, all of these white people who are talking about, oh, the economy needs to open up so I can go back to work. The few who have those kinds of signs, Amazon's still hiring, boo. Amazon hiring.
Right.
McDonald's still hiring, babe. Burger King, In and Out Burger, IHOP, if they're still open, I'm not sure. I want some pancakes. I shouldn't have said that. IHOP still open. All the fast food restaurants, all these restaurants that have always been essential throughout the stay-at-home orders, the grocery stores. Walmart's still hiring, baby.
Walmart is still hiring. That's right.
Target
That's right.
is hiring. So
Exactly.
the issue is not that you feel that your freedom is violated because you can't go back to work. No, you don't want to go work at those low-paying jobs that you have been crapping on all this time. That's what it is. Because if you really wanted to work, the jobs are out there. Essential employees, all these essential employees, hon, are dropping like flies from the coronavirus, and the meat packing plants, the food distribution warehouses, the few manufacturing places that are still open. People are getting sick and dying. There are plenty of jobs. Go get one of them.
That's right. And and you can't help but think that there is another force behind all of this protesting. That there is a invisible and maybe not so invisible hand that is being like the puppet master to these people, promoting the agenda of business. And that's all it is. It's just promoting the business. Because you look at it this way, even business knows that, well, it doesn't look right if we come out and actually put pressure on government to open up. Business be like, well, that doesn't look right, considering how the country is hurting and average working people are hurting. But if we can get working people, or so-called the working class, to go out there and ask for it themselves, then hey, it's not, so we're off the hook. So and I've heard that there have been special interest groups that have been behind these protests. I mean, I don't know that for a fact, but come on, there has to be, as I say, someone that's pulling the strings on all of this.
Well, actually, that is true, hon. It has been found and verified that several people who are connected with folks within the Trump administration and several people who are connected with the Proud Boys and other far right white nationalist organizations are indeed behind organizing and funding these protests, along with some right-wing gun groups. Now, you've heard us here in Luqman Nation. We are not anti-gun ownership. We think anybody who wants to own a gun should own a gun because that's your right. But we don't align with these right-wing folks because the Second Amendment means something different for us than what it means to them. And they will use it in a different way than we will. So we just want to make that very clear. But yeah. Yeah, and then some conservative anti-abortion groups have been, gotten into this thing. So yeah, the right wing white nationalist faction of this country are absolutely deeply involved in organizing and propagating and funding and pushing these protests that are going to continue to happen. And Cindy K over on Facebook, what up, Cindy, said that it seems that many people scream the loudest to reopen the economy. They just don't want low wage workers staying home. Well, that's exactly the point. Because if their thing was that they just want to go back to work, like we said, there's plenty of job openings out there. Walmart, Target, Amazon, McDonald's, they can go to work somewhere. They don't have to force other people to go take those jobs from those essential worker heroes who are falling ill from the virus and dropping like flies. Go right ahead and fill in those shoes at these food processing plants that are closing down because people are being infected by the virus. I'm not sure if this dude is serious, but Daniel Goheen on Facebook says hashtag no more social distancing. Well, Daniel, hashtag you need to stay the hell away from us. That I'm just you do what you want, but when you're talking about potentially putting other people in danger, then that's where we draw the line. You stay out, do without a mask, gloves, whatever you want to, but no, you gonna stay away from me and mine. That's just
This is what gets me. People are entitled to feel how they want to feel. Hashtag this, hashtag that. But it's amazing what we put our efforts and energies behind. When the France and you had this workers' rebellion in France and in Spain and Portugal. When you had this workers' rebellion, where workers were actually rebelling against in Greece against the austerity measures that the government was trying to put forward, basically screwing the working class again. And in America, everybody was like, "Well, what the hell is wrong with America? Why Americans aren't basically joining the rest of these countries and demanding in worker solidarity?" No, we didn't. And the thing of it is that we'll put our energies and stuff behind, hashtag social distancing or hashtag this and all this other kind of stuff. But when the wealthy elites and the oligarchs and stuff, when they keep constantly screwing us, there's never no solidarity. And this has always been, and this speaks to a larger issue. There has always been a problem in this country, and a lot of it is due to the rooted racism that exists here. That you can never get a united workers movement here because the business class and the political class have been successful in manipulating these little class differences. You have a little bit more coins than somebody else, then somehow you don't identify with even though we're all workers, even though we're all being screwed by those who are in power. Because you have just a little bit more, and we've seen this play back all the way because in Luqman history like to provide context. We've seen this even during the times of slavery, during the human trafficking and when capitalism was based off of black bodies. We've seen the same thing where the planter class, the aristocracy down there, and others have manipulated poor whites and used in the context of race in order to break up any kind of identifying that poor whites had with black and native people. We brought up before about the Bacon Rebellion and
that's
others
right.
where poor whites identified with native and black people and seeing that their success lied in a united movement against those who were really in power, who was not only screwing them, but who was taking all of the wealth. So when they came up with the context of race and say, well, you're white, so you have more in common with us, even though there was no really tangible benefits for being poor white. But we'll let you rule over our slaves. You could be an overseer. You could be this. You could be that. And so that was enough for a lot of them because after all, I'm just a little bit better. So you see these things being still played out today, where there is no identification amongst workers to realize that we have more in common than we do differences. And so this benefits those that's in power, and that's why these groups that you named who are behind ignorant that
Yeah.
I mean, it's so irresponsible for someone who is the chief executive of this country. You know, they used to tell Obama that, he was so divisive. He's responsible for furthering damage and race relations in this country, and he's not healer in chief. Well, I mean, my God, this guy is actually calling for armed rebellion.
Right, right. And I mean, let's be clear, for those of you who just joined, the voice you hear is that of my husband and the producer of Coffee Current Events and Politics in Luqman Nation, Abda Shahid Luqman. He is remote right now. Listen, we need to make it clear that, every time we bring up the comparisons to the way politicians and the American public responded to the things that Obama did and said, we're using him as an example for the clear contrast in the way the very same people are making cover for and propping up all the crazy, psychotic, racist stuff that Trump is saying, not because we're fans of Obama, not at all. We are absolutely not fans of the neoliberal in chief in blackface, not at all. But there is a clear difference in the way these very same folks who were just convinced that Barack Obama was going to destroy the country all by himself, but he at the same time wasn't qualified to be president. I don't know how that works. But now here's somebody who, I mean, he's convinced people that they should probably drink bleach or inject, no, I'm sorry, not drink bleach, inject bleach into their lungs, inject disinfectant into their lungs. Maybe that could be tried. I don't know. I mean, and people are giving this man cover. So we need to be really clear that the reason this kind of foolishness and all of these people out here who are protesting these stay-at-home orders, they've never gotten out and protested the actual violations of the civil liberties and the rights and the bodies of Black and Latino and Native people under police brutality. They didn't get out there and protest for workers to have a $15 minimum wage. They didn't get out there and protest to raise the minimum wage. These were the very same people who sat around when workers were out there protesting to raise the minimum wage. These are the very same folks who were saying, well, you don't deserve a minimum wage because that job was meant for a teenager. Nowhere in that, nothing. None of that. That's not even true. Well, if you want more money, you need to go back to school and get a better education. These are the folks who said that kind of shit to low-wage workers who are now essential heroes when those folks were out in the streets protesting for not even a livable wage, because $15 an hour is not a livable wage in this country anymore. Well, after this economic destruction, it might be, but at the time, the fight for 15 spread across the country and really gained steam. $15 an hour wasn't a livable wage in this country anymore. So these folks out here protesting, talking about their rights are being violated because they got to stay at home to keep them from being infected with a virus and to keep from infecting other people. These are folks who honestly don't care about other people. They have never gotten out and supported anybody else in standing up for their rights. But any little inconvenience to them feels like oppression, because nobody has ever told them that they cannot do what they want. That's just not done in the United States to most white people. So that's and honestly, hun, this whole thing, the racial aspect of this whole thing, I don't know. We were talking about this earlier too. Not sure how people are surprised that the spread of the virus is happening the way it is in Black and Latino Native communities as opposed to white communities, and exposing the disparities between white and Black communities. Just to run them down real quick again, higher rate of poverty among Black people, Latinos, and Native people, smaller populations in this country as compared to white people. More people in those groups are poor. More people in those groups live in segregated, overcrowded, underserved communities that do not have decent access to quality food, health care, transportation, jobs. A lot of people in those in these communities are overrepresented in these low paying jobs where they can't work from home. They have to show up every day, and if they don't go to work, they don't eat. So you got a lot of people who, before this pandemic struck, in this country and in other countries around the world, but not the countries that had strong social safety nets. But in this country, before this pandemic struck, you had people in these low wage jobs going to work sick because they didn't have they didn't get sick paid, sick time. They didn't get paid time off. They literally could not afford to be sick because if they didn't go to work, they didn't get paid, and if you don't get a full paycheck, you're short on groceries, you're short on your rent, you're short on medicine.
Right.
That was true before coronavirus hit. That's still true now. And a lot of those jobs are food service industry workers.
Well, I mean, there was a lot that you just said right there. I think that those of us who have some knowledge of the makings and the history and the machinations of this how this country works, we have to understand that number one, the way that capitalism is expressed here. Of course, France and Germany and all they all are considered capitalist countries, but you mentioned something about a strong safety net. Why is it that that the French, for example, whether they're black, Arab, or even of Caucasian descent, they look at themselves as not as French, and as French, as being French, then they understand that there is a certain responsibility from the government that is due towards them. Same thing in Germany.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about these, but that was never done here. So you
Right.
see, the thing is the fact that the reason it would be the same way here had everyone, including those of us who are descendants of slaves, if this country had lived up to its intentions to make us include us Americans as they intended to do, but and so having African Americans and Native Americans to some sort to identify as being American, but because this whole way that this society has operated has always been based on inequities. And what we were talking about, where Caucasian Americans got more than everybody else, there was never this identity as we're all just Americans. They talked that, but it was never, the government never practiced that through policies and through the resources that it distributed. So that never happened here. That's the reason why you could never get a nationwide workers' strike in America, because there is no identification with the American with the American politics, with the American creed, or anything, especially not for black people. So when there is no one, when there is nothing, when people feel like they're not invested in the system, then why demand anything from the system?
Mm-hmm.
Why expect anything from the system? In France, they're like, we're supposed to get this, and you're not taking this back. In Germany, this is what we expect our government to do. Spain, Portugal, everywhere else. But in America, then the whole psychology is that if you're in a certain group, then you shouldn't get anything. Let's go back to what you were talking about, the fight for 15.
Mm-hmm.
That never got off the ground, hon, because once again, and we spoke about this on our last show. Once again, it's what was represented. The fight for 15 was represented by black and brown faces.
That's right. Mostly black and brown faces with a few poor white folks in there.
Exactly. So when you see who were in the leadership positions, and when you see who was in the leadership positions, who were the ones who were being the mouthpiece for these movements stuff, it was mainly black people, and in some cases Latino people. And so these are the people in this country who have never who are seen as not deserving.
Mm-hmm.
As not deserving, that you should just take what
Mm-hmm.
Then, when the face of poverty went from white to black, we spoke about that last week.
Yep.
When during the Great Depression, poverty was seen as when white people were the face of poverty, then it was more of a compassionate attitude. We see this with the opiate epidemic.
Mm-hmm.
It's this compassion when there are white victims.
Right.
But
Right.
outside of that, when the victims are not white, then somehow it's blaming the victim.
Mm-hmm.
It's their fault somehow, and it's also this reluctance to even acknowledge that the same thing that can cause white poverty or poor white people are the same things that can cause poor black people or poor Hispanic people. That is never acknowledged. It's
Right.
always something that is always viewed as personal responsibility. But nobody never said when the face of poverty was white that it was their fault.
Right.
Nobody never said that the people who are the young white kids and those who are caught up in the opioid epidemic, that is their fault that they started doing heroin and all this other kind of stuff.
Right.
But somehow the
Right.
personal responsibility argument is always laid at the feet of black and brown people.
Yep. And that's right. I mean, look, there's all this compassion for the victims of the opioid epidemic who are represented as mostly white, but there are plenty of opioid addicts who are not white. But there are all these studies that are being done about the loss of manufacturing jobs that led to economic insecurity, and that's what drove people to drink. And then the drinking wasn't enough to alleviate their anxiety because of their economic insecurity. So then they turned to drugs, and we need to help them. But when it was black folks and anything else, whether it was heroin during the Vietnam era, or whether it was crack after that, or whether it is black victims of the opioid epidemic, it's all about, well, they are just a bunch of amoral drug addicts and they need to clean themselves up and blah, blah, blah. But see, we have been telling this country about the racial injustices and the racial inequities that don't just exist in this country. It's not just something that, just happened. That these things have been perpetuated by policy, by politicians, by people in this country, and they've been supported largely by a large segment of white America for a very long time. We kept saying this. These things couldn't keep happening if white folks weren't just okay with it. But I mean, I don't know what else to do but to bring up the Kerner Commission again. How many times have we talked about the Kerner Commission, hon?
A whole lot. A whole lot.
Over the course of us doing this show since 2014, we have brought up the Kerner Commission so many times because the Kerner Commission is the key. Now, if you don't believe all the history, 370 years of history from enslavement to the Civil Rights Act, to the passage of the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act, if you don't understand that nearly 400 years of history doesn't just point to racism being a problem in American society, but it actually points to racism being a part of the foundation of this country. Racism existed almost from the moment that America was a thing. And it was legislated into the establishment and the growth of this country and its laws. And it was in 1968, after the passage of the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, that Lyndon Johnson reluctantly passed. He didn't want to pass those pieces of legislation, but there was a lot of agitating in the South. Black folks in the South were tired. They were tired, and it was spreading across the country. Black people, being brutalized and murdered for wanting to vote, for sitting at a lunch counter, for wanting to go into the front door of a store to try on clothes. And white folks, including the police, were complicit in all of this violence against black people. So Johnson he just wanted to shut black folks up, honestly, and he wanted to end the unrest. That's really what it was about.
Yeah, and let's be clear, Johnson also, along with others, they wanted to prevent a second civil war.
That's right.
Let's face it, the black stronger. I think that it was the fact that you had this large underclass that up in the north that was starting to burn stuff down, and they were afraid that this would radicalize the Southern movement, and they would
Yep.
start burning stuff down.
Yep.
So it was really on the attention of white politicians to really prevent a second civil war. Secondly, it was also embarrassing the United States because they were going around preaching democracy and freedom to all these countries around the world, and here these countries looking like, well, hell, y'all not even good at it yourself. This is actually during the time of the independent movements or a lot of African and Asian countries who were starting to break away themselves from colonialism.
Mm-hmm.
So on the world stage, the United States was really looking bad. It couldn't be a moral leader when it came to trying to extol these values to other countries around the world. And so, so that was another reason why they had to pass it. Because, I mean, it was really resulting in the fact that had this brutality continued in the way that it was, that this was going to result in a second civil war.
Mm-hmm. And remember, these pieces of legislation were passed also around the time that the United States, under Lyndon Johnson, got embroiled in the Vietnam War. So, the United States was looking like real crap on the world stage. So Johnson had to do something to, salvage in some way the reputation of the United States. And it was a political calculation. The Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act were not passed because of the largesse and the benevolence of politicians in Washington. They didn't give a crap about black people. They were trying to save face for U.S. hegemony around the world, considering the black eye that oppression of black people was already giving the United States. And now comes Vietnam, and the country's reputation was getting a black eye there too. So something had to give. I put a link.
Well, no, I was just going to add that one of the things that we don't look at a lot, and thanks to Glenn Ford from Black Agenda Report for bringing this up at a talk that you and I attended, is that you had a lot of black men who were overrepresented in the military. And so you had a lot of these black men who were coming home with military training. And so that was looked at too. So you had a lot of black men who were coming home with military training, and hey, what if they got radicalized and if they took their military training to those in the projects in the hood and stuff? I mean, wow, we got a bigger problem on our hands. So
Right.
I mean, so that was even interfering with the war effort, as you stated, Jackie, because you can't count on having black soldiers go and fight your foreign wars if they feel as though that they're going to defend themselves at home.
Exactly. That's a great point. That's an excellent point. And I'm so glad you used that point because you brought up the fear of radicalizing black folks. That was a very real thing because even after the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act were passed, there was still unrest in poor black neighborhoods. Why? I don't know why people get this idea that just because the government passes a law that white folks and white institutions are actually going to pass it, are actually going to obey it, especially when it comes to doing right by non-white folks. That ain't never been true. That has never been true. I don't understand why people have this idea that just because the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act were passed, that all of a sudden, after those pieces of legislation were passed, white people were like, "Oh, we got to do right by the black people now. We have to treat them equally and let them vote, unencumbered." But that's not, no. The racial discrimination in every aspect of society continued. So black protest continued. And it got worse after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated in 1968. So before then, there was unrest. You might hear people call it the summer of unrest, like 1967, where there were uprisings. We call them uprisings. White society likes to call them riots. They weren't riots. They were uprisings against the conditions of oppression that black people were still living under after the so-called promise of these pieces of legislation that were supposed to address these things. And they didn't. Nothing changed for a whole lot of black people. especially poor black people. So there were continued protests, and black people were protesting against very specific things that were continuing to happen in their communities across the country. Cities like Newark, Milwaukee, like you mentioned, Hun, I think you said Chicago, Washington, D.C., Detroit, you know. And then these uprisings happened before the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And then when that happened, 100 cities across this country exploded because
Exactly.
because the hope, the last vestige to see Martin Luther King Jr. was the last hope that white America had, that black America wouldn't hold a grudge.
Right. Right.
That really
Right.
was, and that's probably not the most eloquent way to explain that rage that black people felt when King was assassinated, because it was like, and I think I can't remember where I heard this or read this, where somebody said, you know, white people just killed the last chance they had at peace with us.
Yeah, I remember that quote. I don't know who it's attributed to, but yeah, I remember reading that.
Yeah, I mean, so you know, Lyndon Johnson commissioned a panel of lawmakers from Congress, and he intentionally picked like moderate lawmakers, thinking that they would go out and confirm his belief that the uprisings were caused by, were organized and agitated by black radical groups like the Black Panther Party and other radical black organizations and the Communist Party. He believed that. Johnson really believed that. He commissioned this bunch of congressmen to go and investigate all of these uprisings. He was sure that they would come back and say, yes, Mr. President, it was the communists and the radical Negroes that made all those people do all those things around across the country and all those cities. But that's not what the Kerner Commission found. The Kerner Commission, which released its report after I think a year of investigating these uprisings in several cities across the country, they interviewed probably thousands of black people in these cities where the uprisings occurred, and they found they all got the same answers in every single city, in every single instance. They were all told that black people were still suffering police brutality, racist police brutality, discrimination in housing, substandard housing, discrimination in employment, poor wages, poor education, poor public school education, and a lack of representation, real representation in the government. That's what black people were angry about. That they had been lied to by the government. They had been dangled these pieces of legislation in front of them that were supposed to address these issues, and these things, they were still living under these conditions. The Kerner Commission report came out in 1968 outlining these things, and let me read you exactly. I dropped a link to the Smithsonian Institution's magazine about the Kerner Commission report. The anniversary, the 50th anniversary of the release of the Kerner Commission report was 2 years ago, March 1st, 2 years ago. And there is a quote, let's see, from this report. I dropped the link to this article in both the YouTube and the Facebook chats. I'm just going to read it to you so you read it yourself. Directly from the Kerner Commission report, it says, white society, the presidentially appointed panel reported, is deeply implicated in the ghetto. White institutions created it, white institutions maintain it, and white society condones it. The nation, the Kerner Commission warned, was so divided that the United States was poised to fracture into two radically unequal societies, one black, one white. Now, listen, what the Kerner Commission documented, what they found, was something that black people had always known, and a lot of white people always knew too, but they liked it that way, so they didn't care. So the Kerner Commission set forth a list of recommendations, and the report recommended massive spending on programs to address the racial inequality that existed in this country. What happened? Well, the Johnson administration refused to divert funding from the Vietnam War to these social programs that the Kerner Commission recommended. They started some programs, but they really did not fund them the way they really needed to have been funded. And then what happened was the public backlash against the release of that report, because white people did not like being told that they were responsible for the deplorable conditions that black people lived in and were angry about. That's what happened. So that backlash against the Kerner Commission report led to the rise of Richard Nixon's Law and Order campaign. His Law and Order campaign was a direct response to the Kerner Commission report. And instead of using his platform to address these issues in any kind of way, legislatively or economically, his campaign was to promise that he would restore law and order. That's how Richard Nixon was elected president after Lyndon Johnson. And any social programs that were recommended from the Kerner Commission that existed were immediately cut. So, since 1968, the government of this country has a documented reason for why inequality existed the way it did and does in this country. And this government had just repeatedly refused to actually address that inequality. And not just the Johnson administration or the Nixon administration, but every single administration that came after them. This isn't hidden knowledge, y'all. This is a U.S. government commissioned report. It is in the National Archives. It's in the Library of Congress. It's not ancient history. The people who we elect to allegedly represent us, they know about the Kerner Commission. I know most people do. I'm sure most of them do. But even if they didn't, they understand that this inequality has existed for a very long time in this country, and they continue to perpetuate these tough on crime policies that don't address the inequality, that don't address the racial injustice, but that criminalize and punish the people who are living under the racial injustice. So when we see the injustices or the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 against black people, especially poor and working class black people, and Latinos and Native Americans, this ain't new. This ain't new to us. It was documented in 1968. The only reason it's a surprise to the rest of the country, y'all shocked, because literally, like we've been saying for years, y'all don't listen to black folks. So, hun, what do you got to say about that?
Well, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I just, it's fun. It's really ironic how this pandemic is reigniting this conversation that I'm hearing all on the media and everywhere else about how COVID has exposed the racial disparities in medical care, and how now you got these people as if they just as if they just discovered a new continent. Yeah. Oh wow, black people, there's food deserts, and black people don't have access to fruits and vegetables and stuff like that. And I'm saying to myself, like, well, yeah, but at the same time, these are the same people that when Black Lives Matter and as you said, when we were bringing up how we are adversely affected by racism and stuff, it was again, the same crowd that was sitting up there talking about how, again, personal responsibility. We can go all the way back, Jackie, when you were talking about the law and order stuff. Well, this law and order stuff went all the way back to slavery. That's where the Second Amendment comes from.
Yes, indeed.
And so the Second Amendment
Mm-hmm.
It had to be some outside agitation. That was the term we heard a lot during that time.
It's
It
the
was outside agitators
communists.
because well, yeah, because after all, black people didn't have the capabilities of realizing that they're being screwed over. So it had to be somebody else that would tell them. So these beliefs were held, and they come from their slave-holding ancestors.
Mm.
So the slave, in order to perpetuate the slave institution, you had to tell yourself that these people don't, that they, these people aren't like us. They like the way. How often have we heard that black people love slavery? They love being enslaved. They love
They
being
were
killed.
they were happy slaves.
Right. So these are myths that they had to tell themselves in order to justify an inhumane system.
Mm-hmm.
So as it goes down through the generations, and as we see it even today, it's like that still that belief system that somehow we're incapable of understanding our own plight.
Yep.
And so when I hear people now saying about articulating about the inequities that we suffered since we've been here, I'm saying to myself, and you and I were talking about this today. Okay, so we're talking about it. Now what are we going to do about it? Because
Right.
now there is no person in this country now, because we all had stay at home, so everybody stayed at home and paid attention. If you was watching TV, there's not a single person in this country who hasn't heard this conversation. So now it's like, okay, now that we know, and now it's not coming from Al Sharpton, it's not coming from Louis Farrakhan, it's not coming from, what they call the race hustlers. No, these are coming from nice white people with clinical jackets on,
With a
from
whole lot of
well-respected,
degrees.
right, from well-respected institutions who are saying, yeah, this is the reality in this country. So now that this is known and that everybody knows about it, now it's up to us to say, okay, so what are we going to do about it? We're not going to sit back again and have and be told that now is not the time because we can't afford it. What do you mean you can't afford it? You're just giving the banks $1 trillion a day. Oh
Right.
yeah, you can afford it, and it's up to us as black people and our allies, those who consider themselves our allies, to put a sustained pressure on this government and say, hey, look, you done gave the banks $1 trillion a day. You done passed a stimulus package, even though they don't go far enough, $1 trillion stimulus package, and you're still paying trillions for wars that you're still fighting.
Yep. Oh, that's
So
mm-hmm.
don't sit up here and tell us that you cannot rectify the injustice of 40 million people in this country.
Exactly. And speaking of wars that we're still fighting, and then I gotta highlight a couple comments over here on YouTube. I don't know if y'all knew it or not, but while we don't have enough tests to see how many people actually are infected with the coronavirus in this country, you ain't getting another round of stimulus. I don't know if anybody told you that, but don't expect that $2,000 a month for the next 6 months. Don't hold your breath on that. Um, and most people still haven't gotten their unemployment checks from last month. Yeah, the United States is still bombing countries. Still bombing countries. As a matter of fact, just last week, airstrikes against alleged terrorists in Somalia. Somalia, which has one of the poorest health infrastructures in the world. There are about 300 confirmed cases of COVID-19 in Somalia, in little bitty, broke Somalia. And instead of providing assistance to that country, this country is spending the money to bomb them. Just like it's spending the money to send warships off the coast of Venezuela. Just like it's spending the money to impose sanctions against Iran and threaten to starve those people to death and make it impossible for them to get the materials they need to combat the spread of coronavirus in their country. Yeah, your government in this country is telling you that it doesn't have the resources to give you what you need to survive this pandemic, but it's spending that money to bomb other people still. Just needed to point that out. But also,
I wanted to point this out too.
mm-hmm.
We love, this country loves the demonize China, right? Oh, the Chinese this and the Chinese that. But how about it's the Chinese who are airlifting medical material and humanitarian aid to countries while we're dropping bombs?
Right. Right. Other countries around, and not all countries, because there are conflagrations all over the place. Not as much as before the pandemic hit, because most countries are trying to deal with the pandemic. But other countries are participating in international cooperation, at least for the time being, uh, 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 um, to fight to combat the spread of this virus together. They're sharing information. They're providing medical assistance to other countries. They are providing resources in many different ways. What's the United States doing? What is this government doing? Bombing people, because that's the American way. Lord have mercy. Real quick,
Right.
over here on YouTube, uh, what's going on, everybody on YouTube? Victory Jen, Mad Black Star. Let's see, go down, 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 down. Forrest Hinton, what's going on? Alessandro Bartolo, Sandy, Blue Ocean. Let me see, make sure I got everybody. Yes. So these comments were pretty interesting over here. Thank you, Victory Jen, for telling people to touch the like button. Thank you all for sharing. But
And subscribe.
and yes, subscribe. Victory Jen said Abdus about your commentary on Vietnam. He said spot on. Well, I'm sorry, said spot on. But Victory said, oh no, Eleanor Shellstrop. Hey, Eleanor said, when we were talking about the Kerner Commission, that was a Kerner Commission report that was released in 1968. Eleanor commented, "Oh my God, Biden knew about this study," meaning Joseph R. Biden, the presumptive nominee of the Democratic Party. Yes, there is no conceivable way that Joseph R. Biden could not have known about this study, because Joseph R. Biden began his career in Congress in 1973, 5 years after this study was published. I refuse to believe that there is no way that Biden did not know about this study. I just don't believe he didn't know about it. And then Victory posted a quote that Joe Biden himself said, quote, "I don't want my children to grow up in a jungle, a racial jungle." That's what Joseph R. Biden said in response to why he didn't like, as he claims now, the way federal desegregation was going to be proposed with busing. But look, this is when we say that Republican and Democratic politicians have perpetuated these inequalities and racial injustices in this country, we mean that shit. We're not making that up. These people knew what was being done to us, and they kept doing it because it kept getting them elected. Let's see.
But that,
Yes.
let me add this though.
Yes.
We have to understand that the way that politics the way that politics is performed in this country, you cannot really you cannot gain office, especially nationally, being politically friendly to black people. You can't. Barack Obama understood this, even though he was considered so-called the first black president. But the way that he engaged us was he was playing the same politics that white politicians do. Chastise us. Don't take us seriously as a constituency, and play the personal responsibility game in order to gain favor with that segment of the white electorate. Who love to see the finger wagging at the black community, because after all, America's the greatest country on earth. So if you're not making it here, it's your fault.
Right.
So the thing of it is that you cannot. Bernie Sanders even played that game. I know people don't want to hear that, but the whole reparations debacle that he had was also playing the racial politics. You can't be seen in this country as being too politically friendly or understanding towards the plight of the black community. This is why Bernie Sanders was like, reparations? What does that look like?
Right.
And it's not that he didn't know. The fact of it is that he was playing
Yeah. I mean, how many times have we said it? How many times have we seen it? We pointed out. And I mean, I'm so tired of talking about Bernie Sanders and the Democratic Party right now because honestly, the Democratic Party canceled the New York primary. They didn't just postpone it again because they canceled it and they took Bernie Sanders' name off the ballot. This is the political party y'all progressives think you gonna change from the inside. They have made it quite clear that you are not gonna change nothing. You ain't gonna change nothing from the inside of the Democratic Party. But listen, we kept trying to tell people that there is a reason that Bernie Sanders and his campaign staff didn't make more overt inroads in the black community, specifically addressing these issues that black people brought up, because he couldn't be seen to do too much for black folks. He had to keep pushing that class, it's class not race issue. You know, so I just lost Tubbs, and I think he might be think he might have his phone may have died. Let me see if we can get him back. But it has been an hour now anyway. And man, I mean, we are facing you know, people are always talking about how there you are. Oh, okay, that's what I figured. Okay, well, we're at a little over an hour 6 minutes, so we're gonna wrap this up. Listen, folks, we are always talking about how Donald Trump, we're facing an existential crisis under Donald Trump. History has shown us that we have been facing an existential crisis under every administration in this country. Every single one of them. So Donald Trump is not any scarier to us than the other presidents who have put us in this position, kept us in this position with their decades and decades of legislation that have maintained this racial inequality and class inequality that disproportionately affects Black, Latino, and Native people that we are now dying from under this virus. So, as Mr. Luqman has said before, now that you know what you're going to do about it.
And I want to direct people, to our friend Margaret Kimberly's book with Prejudential.
Oh, yes.
That really goes into explaining the anti-black policies of every president. That this country has ever had.
Absolutely. I'm dropping a link to that book also into both the YouTube channel chat and the Facebook channel chat. Shout out to Greg Kennard, Mille Teneo over on Facebook, Dylan Saavedra. Sorry if I mispronounce your name right. Spell it phonetically and I will get it right next time. Thanks y'all, Cindy K, Dolores Piers, all of y'all over on YouTube, Victory, and Forrest, and just everybody, Mad Black Star, and Eleanor Shellstrop. If, again, folks, you like what you see and hear here on Luqman Nation, consider becoming a patron, $3, $5, $7 a month, or whatever you can and feel like you are able to support us with on our Patreon page. You will have access to special treats. Oh, and Lisa Catlett, you were at the very top and I completely didn't see you again and forgot you were there, girl. What's going on, Lisa? There are special treats and behind the scenes stuff for our patrons, especially on our Patreon page. Mercurial love you too. As always, listen, y'all take care of yourselves, each other, check on your family, and be very good to each other. Peace, but only if you're willing to fight for it. Oh yeah, General Strike, May 1st. Check out our page on Facebook for more information that is coming up within this week. Y'all take care. Good night.
Good night.
Sing it, boo. That's right.